there's something that the NFL will call the word brain drain, the term brain drain.
Sure.
It's when good teams have success, the rest of the league looks to those teams and they want to take pieces of the intellectual property. And it's not the players necessarily, but it's the coaches. And we've already seen it. The Arizona Cardinals had a raucous press conference for Jonathan Gannon. You think they're bringing in Lombardi yesterday, the way they brought him in. And he was so excited to be part of the Arizona Cardinals organization as their head coach. So that's one major piece of the defense is gone. The Indianapolis Colts, a couple days earlier, introduced their head coach, Shane Steichen. He was emotional and thanked every single member of that Philadelphia Eagles offense. He went one by one. He's thanking Boston Scott for what he provided to him when he was in Philly. He's now in Indianapolis, so now you have two coaches gone. We say, all right, you elevate. No. When these two coaches leave, they've got to fill their staffs, and their staffs are going to be 20 people deep. So it might not be the next quarterback's coach who's going with them, but there might be someone who's a quality control coach who is really important. He's coming with one of them. It might be someone who's on the equipment staff that he really has a great relationship. He's coming with them. I think they're going to be picked apart like a carcass right now. The Eagles,
like by vultures?
Like vultures.
Buzzards?
You look at the names that you're hearing, and I've mentioned Brian Johnson as an offensive coordinator possibility to be bumped up. That's awesome. He's 35 years old. He's never called plays in the NFL. He's going to take over for offensive coordinator is the assumption. Well, let's see. And then defensive coordinator, they still don't have a name that's a favorite. Denard Wilson's who I mentioned. It's internal. But then maybe they go outside the box. The point of this, you have 13 free agents, and we'll get into that. But the coaching staff was so good in Philly, and you've had the two main pillars on offense and defense because Steichen calls the plays, and Gannon called the plays. And I know Jonathan Gannon is not the hero of Philadelphia right now based on that Super Bowl performance, giving up 31 points on defense.
That's rough.
That said, that guy had his guys dialed in all season long, and they put up a huge season statistically. Those guys being gone is huge. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they replace those guys and all the people that they bring with them, because they will poach a couple. It might not be the biggest names, but they will take guys with them to their new staffs.
Yeah, and that's the biggest point to me is when you talk about those two are gone, but who are they pulling off the staff that now maybe Sirianni wants to elevate, but some of them you can't elevate high enough to the positions that they'll be pulled into. And you talked about the brain drain, and I want to talk about the free agents they have, because a lot of these players that are going to be free to sign anywhere in the league played huge roles for them this season to get them to the Super Bowl.
Huge list.
And to me, for Howie Roseman, the decision has to be made now as you look at this list. Some of these guys are older. Some may retire. Some may still want to play. But you now have to make the decision, who are you going to invest in and bring back? And I think now for them, as you're looking at the offseason, those are the hard decisions that you have to make. The Philadelphia Eagles have 2 first-round draft picks in this year's draft. Some of these guys, as good as players they are, you have to say, hey, we appreciate what you've done for the Philadelphia Eagles, but we have to move on, and you have to try to draft the replacements. Some of the guys on the roster, you already have the replacements. They just haven't gotten their opportunity to play. And whenever you go through this process, when you've been as good as they were this season, and you let go of notable players, it's tough for all the fans everywhere. It's tough for the locker room, but it's a part of the process. And I think you have to do that because when you look at Jalen Hurts, now going to be going into the last year of his contract, this is a prime time to try to secure him, get a deal done, and have him be there for the future. And now the decision not only is what players are we bringing back, who's going to be our nucleus, but how much are we going to pay Jalen Hurts? We saw what's transpired with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore of trying to agree on what that number is going to be after the Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray and all of these.
They still can't do it, Jay.
You still can't.
We got nothing.
That's the debate right now. What are we going to do? Are we going to give him the $200+ million guaranteed that Cleveland gave Deshaun Watson? Are we going to try to go into the draft and build around and say, hey, with our quarterback position, we don't want to give our entire salary cap to him? Those decisions have to be made, and now you have to do this moving forward.
He was awesome on Sunday.
He was amazing.
I'm watching these highlights.
And still trying.
How did he not win?
I don't know.
4th and 5, he gets it in that one.
My goodness.
Look at that run.
What's going to get you to the mountaintop? Those are the decisions that Sirianni just said that you have to make this offseason if you think you're going to be able to get back to that spot they got to this year.
It's fun to say brain drain. I like that term.
Brain drain.
Brain drain sounds like a drink I'm going to have on the beach next week. Can I get another brain drain? It's one of those freezer things that spins around. You know those?
Many straws in it.
So
and it has
many
like
straws.
a circular.
Another brain drain here, please.
To Gannon! To Steichen!
Yeah.
Umbrella at the top.
Kyler.
I want it. It's, listen, it's so hard to get back. It's so hard to win again. I was watching the mic'd up of the Super Bowl, and after the Bradbury penalty, they have Jason Kelsey mic'd up. and he's just on the side, and he's going, they're going to call that? They're going to call. Well, that's game. That's game, guys. And he just knew it. He just knew it was over. They didn't get back last time. They won the Super Bowl, and they actually won. It took years and new coaches and new quarterbacks. I just think now that we're sitting here, it's okay to say this. Like, they got some big breaks, this team. Things really bounced their way. And I mean, the NFC title game was bizarre, and I don't discredit them at all. The best team that they were going to face was broken 5 seconds into the game. I think the hottest team and the most dangerous team in the NFC this year was the Lions, and they didn't get in. I just think the NFC is going to get better. I think that's how it's going to work through the draft, through free agency, and the Eagles will too. I just think there's going to be so much more competition next year. And we looked at the AFC. It was this absolute gauntlet and this Lord of the Flies thing with all these talented teams and who's going to survive. And the best team did. The NFC was weird, and it was flat, and it was like the Rodgers thing didn't work. The McVay thing was wildly broken. The Brady thing kind of petered out. And then he was left with like, okay, well, can we beat Daniel Jones for the 3rd time? We'll just slap the Giants around. And then the Niners game was over in the first 10 seconds. It was over. And then we're there, and then they couldn't beat the Chiefs. I don't think you can run that album back. I just think the NFC is going to be way more talented through the draft and free agency because so many teams were so bad. And then I just think they're not going to have that kind of luck again. So brain drain, sure. Jalen Hurts, sure. All these old aging players and all that. I think there's going to be a much tougher NFC field next year, like there was last time. I mean, you met the Nick Foles Super Bowl, this amazing thing where they outplayed Tom Brady. They get right back to the playoffs. They lose to the New Orleans Saints because Alshon Jeffrey drops a pass in the Superdome. And it's like, they were still great, but they weren't good enough. It's very tough to get back.
It's interesting. I interviewed Brett Veach, the GM of the Chiefs, right after the game on the field. And I'm like, you guys were down 10 points. Was there ever a doubt? And he's like, he said, like on camera, the AFC was significantly better than the NFC this year. Our road was significantly harder. We had to beat significantly better teams. Like, we knew that adversity hits, we'll be ready. I think it's fascinating because, to your point, Stafford's injury paired with Rodgers' team falling apart, all that stuff, there wasn't that emerging. And it kind of was like the Eagles were the only great team.
The Niners were an amazing team. Amazing. They could have beaten the Eagles. And then just this terrible circumstance that's not the Eagles' fault, not the Niners' fault. I think the NFC had 2 great teams, and one of them got broken. You know?
And then there was a 3rd team that won a bunch of games, but they weren't that good either in the Vikings.
That
experience, too, in the NFC North was strange, but they weren't that talented when you really put the test in the postseason. Peter, it was really fun the week leading up to the Super Bowl watching you do the segments on like how to build a champion because every team does it differently, and whether it takes you 5 years to do it or the Rams 1 year to do it, and the bricks look different for every team. The Chiefs did it one way. I look at the Eagles and this like sexy term we came up with those 4 guys in the trenches, the core 4. They drafted those guys back in 2010. 11, 12, and 13, the old heads. 3 of those, BG, Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, free agents. You got to figure that out. Lane Johnson's still going to be with the Eagles through 2025. But the Eagles, I think this characteristic of this team and why they won was because of those 4 guys. Dinner table conversation at my house now revolves around talking about who's going to draft where, and I know that's like a fun exercise to do, and I'm always like, go for the flashy guy. But then my husband Sam is like, draft on the line, and then he always like brings me down to reality of like, that's where you build your team, and the top 10 guys aren't going to go anywhere. And
Jamie, you talk about that at dinner?
We talk about that at dinner.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be about children's shows.
No, we play like general manager. Like, what would you do if you were the GM of whatever? And Sam's just like, you have to draft on the line, which I always think is like so boring. But then I look at that full screen and I'm like, ball is life. But also, like, it's true. It's true. You get a great guy. But the problem is, they've been waiting 10 years to have 2 Super Bowl appearances. And they won the first one. And there was the second one, and it was the last year where 3 of those 4 guys were under contract with that team. What are they going to do? How are they going to get back? Because a lot of those Jalen Hurts highlights are because the offensive line was amazing. So he's not going to be able to play that great if the line isn't solidified once again.
They drafted Cam Jurgens last year, so there's a natural replacement for Kelsey already in-house. They drafted Jordan Davis, a natural replacement. Nakobe Dean's there. Like, they've got the guys ready. So if they got... Look, if Brandon Graham's like, I need X amount of dollars, that could be a hard discussion.
Those are the decisions that you have to make.
Yeah, last night, Brooke and I were having this debate at the dinner table about whether or not Jonathan Gannon can maximize Kyler's talents. And she's going the other way, and I'm saying, no, we need an old school guy. This is what we talked about last night.
No Blippy talk?
No, we're talking Cardinals front office. We live and breathe this stuff. That's what you guys do.
Yeah.
Monty Austinfort was on the table.
We have dinner while they're watching Bluey. So like they're occupied with the screen, which we love the screens.
Love that
and then I'm like, the Colts
screen.
have the 4th overall pick. Why don't they go after this quarterback? He's like, I don't know. Like, they should go for alignment. I'm like, it's always so logical. It's annoying.